Political Studies at Bar-Ilan. His research interests include international relations, Middle East diplomacy and security, the politics of human rights and non-governmental organizations, NGOs, Israeli politics and arms control. He works with a number of international organizations, including NATO. He participates in Track 2 workshops and the Interparliamentary Coalition for Combating Anti-Semitism, and is the founder of the program on conflict management and negotiation at Bar-Ilan University.
I could use all my 7 minutes to thank and compliment the organizers, students who did, I agree with everything that was said, an amazing job in a very difficult environment. I was in South Africa at Limud about 2 years ago, and I could, for many reasons, couldn't have done what they did. But particularly, it's the most difficult environment that I've ever been in. Maurice Ostroff, I think I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Maurice asking me to come. From Jerusalem, after a day of teaching, to come out to Herzliya, it's almost like going to Chutz La'aretz. But if there's somebody that has learned how to fight this political war, and that's what this is, ladies and gentlemen, this is political warfare. And Maurice has always shown the ability to... Maurice knows that when you fight political warfare, number one, you never win on defense. Number two, you need a strategy, and you need tactics that match that strategy. I agree, unfortunately, with the comments that were made. The Israeli government, to a large degree, has neither strategy, nor tactics, nor troops, nor weapons, nor training. It's very frustrating to have meetings after meetings and be told, well, yes, maybe, and yes, we'll have some budget, and then we don't have budget at the last minute, and all sorts of other things. So we have to do this ourselves. It's our country. And we have to take it upon ourselves to change, to fight back in this it's a dirty political war. It's created out of lies. It's an extension of the same war. We can go back to the 1920s. We can go back to November 29th, 1947, when the Arab-Israeli conflict began, or May 1948, or you take any of those dates. The political warfare to erase Israel from the map has not changed. The tactics have changed, the strategy has changed, but the basic goal is exactly the same, over and over and over again. Now, it's the language of apartheid. It's Israel Apartheid Week. It's BDS. The day that it started, well, it was actually 3 months earlier, it was the preparatory conference for the Durban NGO forum that took place in early September 2001. I don't know if any of you were there in Durban, South Africa at the time, but if you were there, you certainly know that that was a full-fledged declaration of war. It was actually the text, the framework was created in Tehran at what was called the Preparatory Conference of the United Nations Commission on Human Rights. We can thank the former President of Ireland, Mary Robinson, for having presided over that. Not even, the word circus doesn't even apply to that. In Tehran, there was a meeting of the United Nations Human Rights Mechanism to create the framework for running this political war against Israel using the language of human rights. That language, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, was written and adopted by the new United Nations immediately after the Holocaust. It was post-Shoah. And now that same language and the mechanisms that were created for that, the Human Rights, now called Council in the United Nations, which just, I think, elected Iran as its president for the next 6 months. You could laugh at this, but it's day after day, week after week. It's exactly how this works. Nobody was dealing with the human rights community, the network, the non-governmental organizations that ran Durban. Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International. There were 1,500 organizations. Somebody paid the tickets for most of them. Some were South African. The South African organizations played a central role with their Palestinian friends. And let's remember that the main speakers at that conference were Yasser Arafat and the father of someone who claimed to be the father of Mohammed al-Dura, who allegedly had been killed a year earlier by Israelis in cold blood. That what we call Pallywood was the beginning of that war. Those were the speakers in 1,500 organizations, sent delegates, 5,000 people were in that stadium in Durban to declare war against Israel. And if you look at the text, the number of times the word apartheid, genocide, ethnic cleansing appears with respect to Israel exceeds 10, and nothing else in that resolution, in that declaration, had any substance whatsoever. This was a declaration of war against Israel run through the human rights facade, the network. These organizations are wealthy. The organizations that lead this, yes, there are other ones that are scraped together small funds. But Amnesty International, last time I checked, had an annual budget of 200 million pounds, British pounds. That's real money. It's not shekels, it's dollars, it's real money, pounds. The European Union and its constituent members provide somewhere between 70 and 100 million euros for this war. You cannot turn around, you cannot open a newspaper, Jerusalem Post or Haaretz or The Guardian or The Economist or just about anything else, or turn on the BBC without seeing evidence of this NGO war. And as Leah said at the beginning, this is not about a two-state solution. It's not about boundaries or settlements or occupation. This is about November 29th, 1947, and nothing else. And this is paid for, if you're a European citizen, by your tax euros. If you're a British subject, by your pound. When I said anybody European citizen, I also meant the UK, by the way. Sometimes it's forgotten. These governments, through all sorts of mechanisms which I don't have time to describe, and don't have my PowerPoint to show you pictures of, there's an organization called Electronic Intifada. I think at every Israel Apartheid Week event that takes place, certainly in the United States and parts of Europe, Electronic Intifada is involved. Their money comes from the Dutch government under a humanitarian aid framework through a church organization. They get 120 million euros a year. That big, it's called ICO, that big church framework, and they have a Palestinian desk. And the woman who gives them that money also writes for Electronic Intifada. And so it goes over and over and over again. Now, I don't want to leave everybody depressed. You guys are very depressing, I have to say. But there was, as some of you pointed out, even Trevor, I think, Trevor talked about what he was able to get the BBC to do. There is not a European ambassador in Israel who's unaware of the work that NGO Monitor does, and I'm not just tooting my own horn. It's the same thing is true for each of these. For honest reporting, there's not a journalist who doesn't know about honest reporting. Each one of these organizations has a function. We are self-defined, self-created outsourcers of this war. The ambassadors know about us. Some of them run the other way. Some of us quietly give us information. The foreign ministries in Europe know about us. I get reports back of somebody saying, I tried to provide some information. I mentioned NGO Monitor, and the minister immediately had to leave. We get this information. Human Rights Watch has a committee, has a small group that meets every time that NGO Monitor does a report on their activities. My point is, we can fight these battles, we can win them. Europe provides about 10% less money this year than it did last year, partly because they have less, partly because of embarrassment. Every month or so we find about another 200,000 euros that were cut from this organization or that organization. We lost a battle, a small battle, we didn't get to the battlefield in the European Court of Justice, but now we asked for the documents on this funding for these organizations that lead these wars against Israel. And we were told these are top secret because releasing them would be a danger to public security.